Thank you very much for your time. As you can see on the screen, I've been asked to help you to navigate sections 2 to 4 of the REC-H new ethics application form. So these are the sections that come right after the first section that Prof. Soji just explained to you. The first section is really, while we ask for a lot of detail, it's more of a summary, but we ask for more information in the bits to follow. You might think it's duplication, but it's really asked for a different purpose in a different section. Most of us feel a bit like this when we think about this form, right? Maybe it's too ambitious to try and make you feel quite as calm as this when you think about the form by the end of this presentation, but I hope that you will feel more confident about handling this part of your academic journey after I take you through the next few sections. The first essential points I need to say about this form is that the documents in your application speak for you. You are not present in the room when the REC-H is making its decisions, when we are deliberating. We don't just have reviewers, we speak about your form. So, and we look at all of the documentations, not just the REC-H form. We look at your full proposal, we look at all of your appendices. Make sure that you have consistency across your documents. This is very important. Don't say one thing in your REC-H form and then something different in your proposal. So, like Prof. Soji said, it's best to start filling in this form as you conceptualize your study. And then they will balance across all of your documents. When you look at this form, answer all of the questions, please. Don't irritate your reviewer. Answer all of the sub-questions. Answer it in the order that we ask you. Answer it in the format that we give you. And remember that over-communication is better, but be specific. If we ask you about recruitment, don't tell us about the theory of recruitment. Don't tell us about enrollment. Speak to recruitment. And you can over-communicate about that. And make sure, as it was indicated to you earlier, that the corrections to your application that the FPGC's recommended to you has been made before you submit to REC-H. We will merely send it back to the faculty and you will be delayed. We need to see all the signatures. We need to see the first page completed because we need to know that it's got the scrutiny from the faculty and the approval that it needs before you go on. Once your application has served at our committee, you will receive an email containing what we call an action memo. This contains all of the recommendations that we make based on the information provided to us. And many of those are made simply because you haven't given us all of the information that we need. There are gaps. Perhaps everything that you're thinking about your application is not making it through in your writing. Go ahead. So the first section we're going to work through is about risks and benefits. Evaluating the acceptability of risks and potential benefits of a research project is central to REC-H work. And in practice, this means involving a risk-benefit analysis. So what I'm doing now in the format of this presentation is breaking down the bits in the section. This is actually what it looks like on the form, right? And as an example, you will see there that there's a main question and then there are sub-questions. A lot of people don't answer the sub-questions, one or all of them. And we're talking about risks. We take this very seriously. This doesn't add to your credibility. So answer them all. You need to show that as researchers, you've thought this through carefully. You need to lay all of your cards on the table about the potential risks to your participants, to your community, because this shows us that you care about your participants. You're not just taking advantage of them to pursue your qualification, and that improves your credibility with us. Applications have been rejected in the past because we felt that the risks have outweighed the benefits of the study. The risks to the participants have outweighed the benefits of the study. So be very, very careful when you think this through. So it's about beneficence, right? The principles in the Belmont report that we tell you to go and read. Do more good than harm. The next question is about previous experience, and the person normally that we're talking about is you, the researcher, but it might be someone else. You need to declare this and explain why this needs to be the case. For example, perhaps there's a power relationship in place between you and the target population, so you ask somebody else to go and collect your research for you. State this here. Don't let us find things out later in the consent form or the written information to participants. That's not going to look good for you. The next question is about ethics training. Now, a lot of people get nervous about this one or irritated about this one. So let me clarify. We only require RecH members and faculty reviewers of ethics applications to have formal ethics training and certificates in hand. We don't require you to take one or other particular ethics training as long as it's formal ethics training course. And by this question, we're just trying to encourage other staff and students to make use of opportunities to acquire ethics training if you get it. It's really great for you as a researcher. This question refers to benefits to the participant, but direct benefits only. If they're going to do a medical study, will their condition improve immediately after the study, or will you give them access to the proven beneficial procedures, you know? Not what's going to happen in the long term, not what's going to happen to the community 5 years from now or to the professional field. No, what's going to happen for them as a benefit. This question many students underestimate or even don't realize the social and ethical value that their study has. Don't underestimate yourself, or maybe you were just in a rush and wrote not applicable. That also happens. Trying to get through the form as quick as possible, deadlines, you know. But think about it. To have social value, a research project should be designed to solve a problem that's relevant to the community, that's been identified by the community. And remember that you must continuously evaluate the risks and benefits. But also think about the end result for the community. Are you solving a problem? That's what we want to address, not just to teach you research, but to solve problems and make a difference. The first part of this question appears to be self-explanatory, but it's more complicated in the post-COVID world. If you're using something like Teams or Zoom, now you have to consider all the security precautions you put in place so strangers don't get into the room. You have to put serious thought into whether you need to use the video recording option. This has implications in terms of identifying people after your data is collected. But here is where we want you to indicate what kind of software you're using or form of data collection method. This item is particularly important in the context of POPIA legislation. Now, Prof. Soji has already mentioned this. POPIA talks about personal information. Personal information is not just the ones that identify me, Dalray Gradidge, research psychologist. It could be my gender, it could be my race, it could be the size of my shoe. It's personal information, it belongs to me. Are you going to be collecting any articles, personal or cultural? State it here, please, ahead of time, okay? And what are you going to do with it? This is important because sometimes you don't realize a risk factor involved, and we need to pick that out for you. Now, incidental findings, a lot of people ask, what is this? What do we mean? This is defined as any unexpected discovery that you make during the course of your data collection or analysis. And those findings are outside of the scope of your study. So, for example, you're interviewing prisoners convicted for violent crime of the highest level. They're in for life, they're lifers. And the prisoner discloses something about the warden, about the security guards, about another prisoner, or they might say, oh, when I walk out here, I'm about to go and kill that prisoner. This is how I'm going to do it. How do you respond? Are you aware of any mandatory reporting obligations? Do you have an obligation to report in that instance? But the basic response that I can give you can always be, well, I'm going to consult with my supervisor about the situation and take it forward in that way. Now, here we want to also look at you as a researcher. Is there any risk for you? COVID is a classic example. You would have been at risk just like your participants if you went to do face-to-face data collection. Or if you're alone in an interview room with a violent prisoner. But please don't muddle your responses in questions like this where there's one general question and then sub-questions. Don't talk about them all together in this. Address each point one by one and in the format that we use, please. I investigated the matter of research insurance coverage with our legal office because people often have questions about this. And I received confirmation that the university does have insurance coverage. It doesn't specify specific instances in which there would be cover, but the process is you make a claim, they investigate, and they determine whether there's liability on the part of the university, and they pay out. So I recommend you answer this item, yes to the first part, Nelson Mandela University to the second part, and NA for the third part. The next section is about the population group. We're going to go into more detail now. I know you've answered some questions in section 1 about this, but let's go into some more detail about it. Has the chosen population participated in any previously approved research? Self-explanatory, right? Or you might not know. That's fair. You can say I don't know. But this question is because we don't want to oversample any particular group. For example, the community that lives next to the Missionvale campus could easily be oversampled because of convenience. But that might also introduce unwanted confounding variables into the study, things that you did not expect. Now, here, Prof. Soji also emphasized the importance of inclusion and exclusion criteria. This is where you say, I am looking for a white male who dresses as a female during the day, but as a male at night with red toenails. You hear what I'm saying? You have a very you're looking for a specific group. You've got to specify every characteristic that you're looking for. And the questions that we think about at Gradidge is, are inclusion and exclusion criteria clearly stated? And are they reasonable? Are you inappropriately including or excluding participants? Very often when participants read your recruitment letter or your oral information to them, they're going to think, why did you pick me? Or why didn't you pick me? Why is my school not in the study? There are benefits here. We also want it. Does the study include vulnerable groups? Did you know that the university students like yourselves constitute a vulnerable group? Why? Convenience. There's a risk of oversampling, but there's also the risk of all kinds of power relationships, not just between lecturer and students, but also dual relationships, even between students. Information could get out. Oh, you know, that one went to this focus group on this thing, and you know, maybe they have AIDS. You know. So this is one of the reasons why we review recruitment, enrollment, data collection, reporting so carefully. It's the same with staff. So we know immediately if you're looking at a university student group or staff group, we need to make sure that protective mechanisms are in place to protect them. And we always, when we think about a target group, we always consider, is there any other way for you to achieve your research objectives? Do you have to use this vulnerable group? Again, with schools, they're also a vulnerable group, and immediately we know there are specific permissions and reporting processes to follow through the DOE. And people often answer this question with Nelson Mandela University. I know research might make us crazy, but not that crazy. You know, when we think institutional, we're thinking about a mental hospital maybe, or prison, as the example I used earlier. But the problem with this is the issue of consent. The person is locked into that institution. And there could be power relationships that negatively affect participation. The target group might be very happy with their supervisors, their guardians, their caregivers, their nurses, but they might want to please them as well, so participate because of that reason. That's still a negative influence. And they could easily be used for research because they're so easy to trample through. But we need to make sure that their rights are not overruled. And there's also a risk of stigmatization following data collection that you must also think about. I could give you so many examples, but I don't have a lot of time. If you're drawing from a particular cultural community, social group, we need to know that you've got a cultural advisor on the inside. Especially, I mean, if you don't have any personal experience of, affiliation to, or knowledge of this group, you want to go in there and, I don't know, measure the attitudes about toenails. And you're quite well-intentioned, you know, but we unconsciously trample into communities very often. For example, a white psychology student wants to go into an African community and see how they feel about something. Is it okay for that person to go into that community? You need to show us as the researcher why it's okay. You need to make a really good motivation about that. Too many times researchers make assumptions and they don't even know that they're doing it, and that's why we're here. And your faculty reviewers, we want to help you. We're on your side. So having key stakeholders in the community is always a good idea. Okay. If you're consulting any records, please specify the source, because we want to make sure that there's permission, there's consent, there are no power relationships. But don't assume that you can use the data through your employee status, your supervisor's employee status. Maybe you have a clinic on campus, it's a university place, and through the course of its work, it collects information. Oh, that's easy, we'll just use that. No. Have you got consent to use that? POPIA, again, you guys must make yourselves extremely familiar with the POPIA Act. Whoever gave you their information must have at the time agreed that you can at a later point come back and open their file to investigate the specific matter. It's very important. And will they know? So they've said, okay, you can use this for research at a later stage. But will they know that their records are being considered? Let's take a hospital example. They're in their beds. The nurses are capturing their blood pressure and things like that. And a researcher comes along, maybe a nurse, a student nurse, and says, oh, okay, those records are right there. I'm just going to copy over. You need to tell the patient. You need to ask him, can I do this? And that can be tedious, but it has to be done. Here we need to identify whether there's a minor involved, and there are very specific conditions that you can go and look up about what you need to do when somebody is 18 and lower than 18 years of age in consideration of your study's objectives. Why? Because of consent and assent. These two terms are based on the principles of autonomy. That's the right to decide, to make your own decision, and privacy. We want to respect all participants. We want to know how you are going to get consent. I've been fascinated with the different manners in which researchers have come up to get consent during COVID. I found out that there are buttons on emails that you can click yes, no on, so many others. But the effect of POPIA on the code of conduct of researchers must be borne in mind here. And the 2015 guidelines from the DOH that Prof. Soji referred to, read it, print it, keep it on your desk, like she said. The university has to make decisions in the coming months, recommended by ASSAF, about the influence of POPI on how we behave as researchers. We don't have all of the answers yet. We don't even have all of the questions yet. But what I can tell you right now is that we've historically preferred written consent, but now we do accept other forms of consent. However, 3 things. You need to make sure that consent is informed. So they need to know what they are agreeing to in detail. Okay? Who is going to see it? Where will it be stored? What will be done with it? And so on. Informed. It must be explicit. We don't do implicit consent, so you can't in a preamble to an online survey say, by participating in this survey, by doing this questionnaire, you are providing implicit consent to being part of the study. No, that doesn't wash anymore. The third thing is voluntary. Informed, explicit, and voluntary. And in explicit means, and this is important, that there must be an action on the part of the participant. There must be a yes, no, but they must tick something, sign something that you have evidence. Oral consent, you can try and figure your way around that, but it's very difficult because if you're going to do oral consent, you must remember consent must be recorded. So then you'll have to have a recording for every individual, which hears the recording, sees and hears them saying, yes, I agree to participate in the study. If the study is getting audited, it's not going to go well for you. And you can't make consent part of your data collection either. It would be so easy when you're doing a Teams focus group or Zoom to say, okay, does everybody consent that we're about to do a focus group on this topic? Show me thumbs up or something. No, it cannot be part of your data collection. It must be separate completely. Here we go into detail with minors. It's pretty self-explanatory. I believe I only have 3 minutes left. So let's go on to the next slide. Legal restrictions, like cross-country studies, European South Africa, POPIA meets GDPR. We spoke about the institutional environment, so we can skip that one. We spoke about power relationships. Let's skip that one. This one is important. If you are going to offer money or some kind of recompense to your participants, make sure that it's recompense for research-related inconvenience. It mustn't be motivation. Gatekeepers, that's fairly obvious. Let's go on. And do you require an institutional authority to consent? Now, a gatekeeper, an institutional authority would be someone like the Department of Education, you know, the very high levels of permission. And you cannot approach your target group until you've got all of your permissions in order. And there's probably a tiered level of permissions that you have to go through before you can begin your work in earnest with your data collection. I could say so much more, but I'm going to stop now. And thank you for your time.